So we've officially hit the dog days of summer of 49ers training camp here in Block 4. Christian McCaffrey injured. Ricky Pearsall left hurt today. And, well, the Brandon Aiyuk situation continues to drag on, and the drama continues to build because it appears that a bidding war has started for Brandon Aiyuk's services. After practice today, Kyle Shanahan said that the 49ers did in fact give Brandon Aiyuk permission to seek a trade. The three teams that we know are in on discussions with the 49ers right now are the Browns, the Patriots, and the Steelers. And there's developing information on two of those fronts. The Steelers are back into the mix after they fell out of the mix yesterday. So the 49ers talks with the Browns and the Patriots encouraged the Steelers to up their offer. And then if you go to the Patriots, well, it appears that they're making a very aggressive push. According to Mike Reese of ESPN, New England may be willing to pay Brock. They wish they could play Brock Purdy. New England may be willing to pay Brandon Aiyuk top 5 receiver money. That's what his report said. Now, so top 5 receiver money would be somewhere between Justin Jefferson, who's at number 1. Amon-Ra St. Brown is at number 2 on the number 3 on the receiving scale. A.J. Brown is at number 2. Tyreek Hill is at number 4 right now, but Tyreek Hill just actually signed a new deal. So it says right here that the new deal has him at $30 million per year. I don't know if they have it updated on Over the Cap. It's around the same ballpark that he was at before, which was $30 million per year, but with more guaranteed money. Jalen Waddle rounds out the top 5 at $28.2 million per year if we're going by APY. So the 49ers obviously aren't quite there yet based on the reports that we've gathered. The offer that they've had on the table for Brandon Aiyuk for a long time, since late April, I believe, has been about 26.5 million. It's unclear if there's been a slight sweetener of the pot. That would put it at about, 27 million. But judging strictly by the APY, they are not in the range that a team like the Patriots would be willing to pay. At that point, it becomes a decision for Brandon Aiyuk. Does he take the massive money from New England? Bad teams typically can pay more than good teams. They have fewer stars to pay, and the salary cap is finite. So New England obviously has more spending power than the 49ers, especially with Brock Purdy's contract looming for San Francisco. But based on what we've gathered, Brandon Aiyuk has been a hard no to New England and to Cleveland in the not so recent past. I don't know if New England's offer, which seems to be increasing to Brandon Aiyuk, is going to change his mind on that regard. But we do know that he's been a little warmer toward Pittsburgh. And if Pittsburgh can impress the 49ers enough with their level of compensation, well, then perhaps a deal can get done there. But the big question is will the 49ers still stand a chance or are they still involved in potentially re-signing Brandon Aiyuk? And the answer to that is you don't rule anything out at this point. It's a volatile situation. It's unpredictable. We talked to Kyle Shanahan today, and he's still holding out hope that they can get something done. Now, the 49ers have to get something done at an efficient price point. If you re-sign Brandon Aiyuk at $34 million per year, that's what Justin Jefferson's making, I don't think it's exactly worth it if you're the 49ers. All of a sudden, you're going to have to make serious compromises elsewhere, probably starting next season. The 49ers want to architect this team in a way that makes it as sustainable as possible for as long as possible. The Kansas City Chiefs let go of very prized receivers, big money kind of guys, twice and still made it back to the Super Bowl and also won the Super Bowl because they believe in Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and the offense. And it just goes to show you that wide receiver is not a be-all, end-all position. Kind of like it's very unlike something like edge rusher, which Nick Bosa occupies for the 49ers. Very unlike something like left tackle, where Trent Williams is at, and where he's certainly going to get his money. He's got more leverage than Brandon Aiyuk, and obviously different than the quarterback position. So the 49ers at some price, and they've determined that price, I think, to be around the 26.5 or 27 million. At some price, they have to say if it goes over this, Brandon Aiyuk's services are just not worth it to us anymore under the context of the salary cap. So to me, it's setting up for either the 49ers get Brandon Aiyuk at a very good rate because he's willing to play for them at that discounted price, but that would also take some swallowing of the ego, because I think that both sides emotionally invested themselves in this negotiation. Now, Kyle Shanahan says that he's been able to remain calculated and prepared and somewhat distant from the business side of things. That's good for him, and it's probably good that the 49ers have some people in the building that have been able to keep their distance just in case they need to swoop in and help get this across the finish line if that becomes a thing. But definitely the people that have been entangled in this negotiation, it hasn't been easy. It's been a strain. Nick Bosa talked about how difficult his was at this time last year. So when you look at how tough this has been, you have to acknowledge that getting it across the finish line would take a exceptional amount of humility and swallowing of pride, probably from both sides, but mainly from Brandon Aiyuk's side, because the 49ers aren't going to budge much on their price. 49ers have been cold-hearted about the line in the sand financially in almost every single one of these negotiations, except for the one where they didn't have a lot of leverage, and that was last year's with Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa got everything. Ultimately, the 49ers had to cave. Ultimately, they gave Nick Bosa the most money ever for a non-quarterback just a couple days before the start of the regular season, because they knew that they couldn't credibly operate as a Super Bowl threat without him. The fact of the matter is that they can credibly operate as a Super Bowl threat without Brandon Aiyuk, but he's also a very good player. He's just at a different position. They value that at about 26 to 27 million per year. So will Aiyuk meet that price, or has the bridge already been burnt too far? That's anybody's guess at this point. And that's some stuff that the 49ers are working to iron out. But they have, like Kyle Shanahan said, he's calculated and prepared for different contingencies today. The 49ers have to be ready for Aiyuk not to be willing to move down to that price. They could, at that point, they can play hardball because they do have the leverage on their side, and they could say, well, you can play on the fifth-year option, or they can start pushing for better returns from other teams, or they could have multiple pots on the stove, which is what I think the 49ers are doing right now. They're seeing if maybe Aiyuk comes back to the table, if they can work something out, see if that avenue is a clear one. And at the same time, they're working on trades in principle with different potential teams. So the New England Patriots and the Cleveland Browns that already have structures in place that the 49ers have agreed to for compensation that's going to go back to the team. And it seems that the Pittsburgh Steelers have thrown their hat back into the ring. And maybe the 49ers was Pittsburgh throwing their hat back into the ring can raise the price on the Browns and the Patriots. That's how a bidding war begins, and that's how a bidding war sustains itself. So that's where we're at right now in these entire sweepstakes. You might have noticed here that I put 49ers re-signing game theory. What do I mean by that? Well, if Brandon Aiyuk and the 49ers are going to find agreement on a new contract, or agreement on Brandon Aiyuk to be happy on his fifth-year option to hold him over for another season. I don't know which one of those two is more likely in the possibility that Brandon Aiyuk stays with the 49ers. Some kind of cooperation is going to have to be established. And this is going to turn into a little bit of a strategy discussion, but I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the prisoner's dilemma. Hopefully some of you have. It's part of game theory. And I think that the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk are in a bit of a prisoner's dilemma because of the fact that communication just hasn't been great between the two parties for a long time, at least as far as it goes to negotiating this contract. In fact, based on what I understand, they were very close to getting something done back in April before Amon-Ra St. Brown signed his contract. But then Amon-Ra St. Brown moved way up into that rank of the top APYs for receivers. And when that did happen, negotiation polarization started. Negotiation polarization intensified with the Justin Jefferson deal, which was way above everybody else's at $34 million per year. And then when negotiation polarization set in and it was really, really tough to have any productive communication at all, I would say that we saw a casual occurrence of the prisoner's dilemma. And this right here, this bottom line is what I want you to focus on. Could read it all here. In casual usage, the label prisoner's dilemma may be applied to any situation in which two entities could gain important benefits from cooperating or suffer from failing to do so, but find it difficult or expensive to coordinate their activities. So in game theory, the standard prisoner's dilemma is two prisoners in separate rooms. Communication is either cut off or compromised. If you rat the other guy out, then you can earn a big benefit, like a shorter sentence. We'll put it that way. But that's only if you rat the other guy out and he doesn't rat you out. If you both rat each other out, then you both end up in a bad situation. But if you both cooperate to not rat each other out in the prisoner's dilemma, if you work together and you both cooperate, then you actually obtain the optimal outcome. You get the shortest possible sentence. That's just, in general, that's how the prisoner's dilemma works. They use that as the illustration for it. That's why it's called the prisoner's dilemma. But you can apply it to all different walks of life. You can apply it to business, and you can apply it to contract stare downs like this one. One can very, very reasonably argue that the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk, the optimal outcome for both parties in this situation is Brandon Aiyuk re-signing with the 49ers at around the rate that they've offered. Is that less than what the Patriots might offer? Less than what the Steelers might offer? Less than what the Browns might offer? Yes. But there is an argument to be made that there is financial value for Brandon Aiyuk, but it's a little less tangible financial value. Might not show up immediately on a bank account or a spreadsheet, but there can be tangible value in playing for the most talented team in football that is an NFC champion favorite, and I think right now is the second best odds to win the Super Bowl. If Brandon Aiyuk resigns, those might move to number one. I think they're just slightly behind the Kansas City Chiefs. There are monetary bonuses for playoff wins and for the Super Bowl title, but there's also that non-tangible value of having the profile of a player on one of the most popular teams in the world, maybe the most popular team in the world. The 49ers sold way more jerseys than any other NFL team had ever sold last season. So that all has to be factored into it. Plus, you have to think about Brandon Ayuk's career longevity and the fact that on the 49ers, since there's a lot of targets on this team, he's not going to be the guy that has to handle 100+ hits per season. He's actually going to be able to roam a little freer across the field. He's going to be able to have a little bit of a workload reduction in a way that when you look at a contact sport like football, where the bruises can be brutal, where the workload can add up, where that forces players out of the league sooner than you would expect. For a potential third contract, maybe playing with a really good quarterback who's delivering the ball accurately on a team that offers good spacing because of all the weapons it has and because the play caller it has, there could be some real monetary value in that for Brandon Aiyuk. This is why this wouldn't be the first time that a player has taken less to remain with a good team versus taking more to go to a bad team. In general, bad teams have to overpay to acquire good veterans relative to good teams. And it works out well in the NFL ecosystem because bad teams typically have more salary cap space. So if they have to spend more money to lure somebody to come over, they can spend more money because they have more salary cap space. Teams like the 49ers who have paid more all pros and more star players than any other team in the NFL, and they have another huge expenditure coming up, Brock Purdy at a high leverage position, those teams naturally have less salary cap space. But if those teams are successful, then they stand a chance of threading the needle of attracting players to sign with them at a lower rate than they would sign with the bad teams who have a lot of money. That being said, it all comes down to Brandon Aiyuk and his decision in this case. And the 49ers have created this decision. It's really, really interesting to me. I think that when we've heard from Brandon Aiyuk, he's been all over the place over the course of this offseason. He obviously has said that he wants to play with the 49ers and his family's in the Bay Area, that he wants to stay on the West Coast, and he hopes both sides reach agreement. I mean, he's been very, very clear about that. But on the flip side, he has requested a trade. And you could say that he was bluffing when he requested that trade, and maybe he was, and maybe that puts this into a situation where we can analyze the 49ers actions and say maybe they're bluffing too, and maybe both sides ultimately want the same thing. But on the other hand, it's not insignificant when you do look at the monetary difference between an offer that's worth roughly $26 million per year and one that's worth 31 or 32 million per year. That's a lot of money. It's $5 or $6 million per year. So over the course of an entire contract, that could add up to what, 20 million, 25 million, just depending on how the thing is structured. So some of this stuff is very significant financially. I know a lot of people that are watching at home are saying, well, what does it matter? 26 million, that's a whole hell of a lot of money. Well, the problem is that, that's 26 million, but it is potentially leaving up to 15 or 20 million dollars on the table versus the other offers. So it's up to somebody like Brandon Aiyuk to decide what they value in this situation. Does he want to go for the bigger contract, a little bit more financial security, a little bit more generational wealth at the start, or would he rather sit down and take the offer from the team that can't afford as big of a contract, but obviously offers the luxury of familiarity and the luxury of being a really damn good football team? But speaking of the 49ers, I have to ask this. Are the 49ers putting Brandon Aiyuk into a box where they're forcing some action here? Because the timing of all this, is interesting. It seems that they started this trade dangling a few days prior to when it hit the news over the last 48 hours, which would give them about 10 to 12 days ahead of the first preseason game. And the reason the first preseason game is significant is because the 49ers have the power to fine Brandon Aiyuk if they so choose. This is up to their discretion, up to one game check, one regular season game check for every preseason game that he misses. So right now they're not fining Brandon Aiyuk because he's actually at camp. He is holding in. He's not holding out. He's holding in. So he's reported to camp. They're not fining him $40,000 per day. But his salary right now, because he's under contract with the 49ers for the 2025 season, is $14.125 million. And I believe I said the 2025 season. I meant the 2024 season. That was not a little slip up with my words. Kind of like Christian McCaffrey today slipped with his words. He said that Brandon Aiyuk was his former teammate. I don't know if Christian McCaffrey meant that. I wouldn't read too far into little errors of verbiage while speaking. But it is true that Brandon Aiyuk has been disconnected from the football team as far as his on-field presence goes. I will say, though, that he has been an active participant in the 49ers running back meeting room. Anyway, back to the fine ability of the 49ers. $14.125 million in 2024. That's Brandon Aiyuk's base salary. You divide that by 18 to get the total amount of each of his game checks. That's $784,000. So per the collecting bargaining agreement, the CBA, teams can fine players who miss preseason games up to the amount of one game check, which in Brandon Aiyuk's case is $784,000. So we talk about maybe putting Brandon Aiyuk into a box that forces some action here. They start the trade talks about 12 days before the first preseason game, and they have the first preseason game with the potential to fine him. I don't know if they're going to do it, but they have the ability to do it coming up on Saturday against the Tennessee Titans in Nashville. So that has created this roughly 2-week long window where Brandon Aiyuk has been allowed to negotiate with other teams to see what kind of contract they give him. And it's allowed the 49ers to negotiate with those teams to see what kind of trade return those teams would provide San Francisco. And so far, it's been reported that the 49ers have found suitable trade return from the Cleveland Browns and the New England Patriots. Although, since the Pittsburgh Steelers are trying to up their offer, maybe the 49ers are going to want a little bit more sweetening of the pot from the Patriots or the Browns as well. That's how a bidding war works. The price can raise before the 40. It's like an auction. The 49ers are like, oh, no. This is not going to, we want this price to be something that we're compensated. The 49ers want to feel well compensated for obvious reasons. They don't want to get worse this season. They would like to maintain as much of a chance to win the Super Bowl as possible. That's obviously the toughest needle to thread because Brandon Aiyuk is really damn good. But we talk about the desire to force movement. Last year, the Nick Bosa thing lasted up until week 1 of the regular season. I don't think the 49ers benefited from how that went. I think they want to avoid that. So since they could find Aiyuk this week, and since we see these trade possibilities dangled out in front of him at the same time or right ahead of the time that they could find him, I think that it is very possible, at the very least, that the 49ers are forcing action right now. And what's the action? Well, Brandon Aiyuk can either take one of the offers that another team, the Patriots, the Steelers, or the Browns, put in front of him, or he can take less money from the 49ers. Either way, the 49ers can potentially bring this saga to an end. So we shall see how it will end. Maybe sooner rather than later, but nothing obviously is guaranteed. A lot of you in here right now. By the way, 49ers, we got some news. Oh, we want to finish game theory. I talked about prisoner's dilemma, and we talk about the fact that I just think it's such a striking line when we look at this that says you could apply it to any situation in which two entities could gain important benefits from cooperating or suffer from failing to do so, but find it difficult or expensive to coordinate their activities. So obviously it's been difficult or expensive for the 49ers to coordinate their activities. When two parties are able to coordinate their activities and reach the optimal conclusion, we call it Nash equilibrium. It's named after John Nash, who is profiled in A Beautiful Mind. That's the movie starring Russell Crowe, stars John Nash. So John Nash discovered Nash equilibrium. 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk will have to find Nash equilibrium if they want to get this contract done. So that is the rundown for you on where the Brandon Aiyuk situation is right now. Now I want to get to the other news. Christian McCaffrey, he strained his calf. And we'll answer questions about Brandon Aiyuk in a few minutes. But Christian McCaffrey strained his calf. He's going to be out for about 2 weeks. On top of that, the 49ers have some other injuries, including Elijah Mitchell. So you've got him, Mitchell with a hamstring strain. It's going to keep him out about a week. You're down McCaffrey. You're down Mitchell. You're going to need a running back or 2 or 3, but you already have some on the roster. But you're going to need at least one reinforcement for this game against the Titans. And that's why the 49ers brought back Matt Breida. Then Ricky Pearsall, who had a slightly hurt shoulder over the course of OTAs that forced him into a non-contact jersey, seems to have aggravated that injury. 49ers pulled him out of practice a little bit earlier today after he caught a bomb touchdown from Brock Purdy. So because Pearsall is out, then you're going to have to delve a little bit more into your receiving depth. But I don't know how long Pearsall is going to be out. Kyle Shanahan did say that was probably more precautionary today, but I do think that the 49ers are going to play it safe, especially since there's some blue non-contact jersey history there. The good news for San Francisco is that Jacob Cowing returned to practice. Tay Martin returned to practice, so they've got a couple more bodies there. Malik Turner is no longer an available body at the receiver room. He's on injured reserve with an undisclosed injury. They needed to free up a roster spot for Elijah Mitchell. So that's why I say that these are the dog days of 49ers training camp. You've got intensive trade and contract negotiations happening. Obviously, Trent Williams is still somebody that you're waiting for at training camp. You've got hard-hitting football going on. I mentioned some of the linebackers today, the young guys, Tatum Bethune, D. Winters were getting after it. And, then you've got guys getting hurt. I mean, and guys always get hurt in training camp. It's happening all around the league. So you're testing your depth. You're making sure the players are acclimating and transitioning from the off-season grind into the training camp grind. And you want to make sure that everybody is as healthy as possible come, what is it, September 10th, I believe, is the 49ers season opener against the New York Jets. All right, I'm going to open this up to a 49ers Q&A. Let's go. Happy to answer all of your questions. Let's let this show grow. Let's get this over $1,000. I want this over $1,000. We're at 916 right now. That's the Sacramento area code. If you're from Sacramento and you're watching, or if you're from the 916 and watching, why don't you put something in the chat section? Why don't you give me a little 916 with a flexed muscle or something emoji in the chat section? There we go. We got some Sacramento love pouring in. Sacktown 916 from Jerome Graves. I like that. Is Jawan Jennings a viable option to replace Brandon Aiyuk as the X receiver? That's a really good question. I think Jawan is more versatile than people give him credit for. There was a time a couple years ago when Kyle Shanahan said that Jawan Jennings was the best separator on the 49ers roster, and that roster included Brandon Aiyuk. He's obviously not as fast as Aiyuk, but I don't think anyone has caught as many passes this training camp for the 49ers as Jawan Jennings. I was standing next to Matt Barrows today at practice, and Jennings made a couple more catches. And after one of those catches, it dawned upon me, and I turned to Matt and I said, I don't think anybody's caught more passes this camp. If there's anybody who has more catches than Jawan Jennings over the past 11 sessions, it's Deebo Samuel, who's been out there, and he's been a workhorse as well. But to me, it seems that Jawan Jennings is getting thrown to even more often. So that, this is a guy that can block. The X obviously needs to block. I think the 49ers like Jawan Jennings at the F because there's a little bit more closer to inline blocking at that position, and he's big and strong. Plus, when you're at the X, you're going to be lined up a little bit further outside most of the time, and you like a little bit more game-breaking speed. That's obviously the one thing that Jawan Jennings doesn't have. He's a little on the slower end as far as straight line speed goes. But the 49ers train their receivers interchangeably, and I do think that Jawan Jennings has the ability to play the X position in a pinch if the 49ers need him to do that. You're going to have Deebo Samuel at the Z. And, speaking of X, Chris Conley has been a great fill-in X for the 49ers over the course of this training camp. I'll tell you something about Chris Conley. I talked to Leonard Hankerson, the 49ers wide receivers coach, yesterday, and he told me they got GPS chips in their shoulder pads, and Chris Conley consistently runs the most out of every 49ers receiver at practice, because this is away from the football. You're blocking, you're chasing down plays. That just shows your desire, your hustle, your conditioning. There are practices where Chris Conley runs over 4,000 yards. Some of those 49ers long practices, he's run over 4,000 yards on the GPS chip. So you can see why they really like that guy. He's a workhorse. He's got a really good rapport with Brock Purdy. I think that Chris Conley is going to make the 53-man. And we have to talk about him getting some X receiver snaps this year based on what he's already accomplished with the 49ers, made some clutch catches last season, and also was a hell of a gunner on special teams. Why would Conley make the team when he cleared waivers last year? Well, they might maneuver around the 53-man cut down. A guy like Conley on a one-year contract, I get it. If you feel that you could also have a backroom deal with Chris Conley, you could say, hey, we're going to cut you, and then we're going to bring you back in week 2, because if you come back in week 2, or you're going to be on the practice squad for the first week, because if you come back to the active roster in week 2, your salary is not guaranteed for the season. NFL teams do these kind of maneuvers all the time. that may be in the cards. I'm not thinking about the 49ers first 53-man roster as much as I'm thinking about what their ideal 53-man roster will be. And assuming that you can get through week 1 without any major injuries, by week 2 you see what teams' ideal 53-man rosters are, obviously pre-trade deadline and all that. But there are a lot of financial rules and maneuverings that happen around week 1 and 2, but I do think that Chris Conley's on the inside of the 49ers 53-man roster picture when you look at the bigger general view. Daniel's traveling to San Francisco tomorrow from the UK. What 49ers related thing to do over the next 4 days? You're going to the Giants game on Saturday. Well, I think the chat section should help you out, but you're not going to a 49ers game. I hope that you're not planning to, because they're playing in Nashville. They're not playing in Santa Clara. As far as 49ers related stuff to do, well, you could check out some of the cool sites. I would go to Kezar Stadium if you want to. That's the original home of the 49ers. It's in Golden Gate Park. You're almost certainly going to go to Golden Gate Park anyway. So go check out Golden Gate Park and go to the southeast corner of Golden Gate Park. That's where Kezar is. It's where the 49ers played up until 1971. And it's an iconic venue. It was, watch the movie Dirty Harry before you come, and then you could do the Dirty Harry scavenger hunt around the city, which part of it happens in Kezar Stadium. There's a really cool story there that I covered last year. The Detroit Lions in the NFL championship game back in the 1950s were ahead of the 49ers 24-7, or the 49ers were ahead of the Lions 24-7 at halftime, and the Lions came back to beat the 49ers, and the 49ers finally got their revenge at Levi's in the NFC championship game last year. It was 24-7 at halftime, and they erased that deficit, so you could walk through the same tunnel that all that stuff happened in. It's right there. You'll see where that all is. Just search my Kezar Stadium video. So I think that's the coolest thing you could do as far as 49ers related stuff in San Francisco is go to Kezar, and then you can go across the street to Kezar Pub, which is the bar where people used to pregame before they went into Kezar Stadium, and still a really good sports bar right now. After the Giants game, or any night really, but I would recommend doing this when you're out in North Beach at night. North Beach is a fun neighborhood. Go to Sam's Pizza and Burgers, no longer pizza there, just burgers, on Broadway, and you'll see a bunch of 49ers newspaper articles from the 1989 season Super Bowl posted as memorabilia up on the wall. And those were all donated to Sam's by an anonymous viewer of this channel, which I think is super cool. Somebody watched this channel. They said, okay, this guy's going to Sam's a lot. It's a great double cheeseburger. He had a bunch of newspaper articles back from when the 49ers beat the Denver Broncos 55-10. And he gave those newspaper articles to Emad over at the restaurant. He got them laminated. He put them up on the wall. So you can go check that out. All right. Moving on. Hopefully I answered your question. Original candlestick seats. Do they have one at Sam's? Kezar Pub has some candlestick seats. Now, Kezar Stadium itself has original candlestick seats inside the stadium, which I think is really worth checking out. The middle portion of the stands, those are all former Candlestick Park seats. So Kezar replaced Candlestick, and now Candlestick is gone. Kezar's been downsized. It's no longer a 55,000 seat stadium. They downsized it after the 89 earthquake, but the part of Candlestick Park lives on in Kezar Stadium. Where can you find all my San Francisco restaurant recommendations? I think I'll have to put them all in one spot, make one big video. That'll be coming at some point, because I know they've just kind of been randomly interspersed everywhere. Maybe it's time that we make that more organized. Dan Arnold asks, do you think the 49ers are asking for more from Pittsburgh than from Cleveland and New England because it's Aiyuk's first choice? They could definitely be doing that. And why not leverage this situation as much into your favor as possible if you're the 49ers? So why don't we talk about some potential trade returns from these teams? There's Pat Fryermuth, the tight end from the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's George Pickens, the receiver from the Steelers. There's Matthew Judon, the edge rusher from the New England Patriots. Obviously, people have talked about Kendrick Bourne. There's a lot of good offensive linemen on the Browns. And Amari Cooper, the receiver, is also on the Browns. I think I would highly recommend the 49ers stay strong in this situation until they can get an impact player or two in return. I know that might be really hard to do. You don't see that happen very often in the NFL, but maybe now that they've got a little bit of a bidding war going, maybe now that they've got a little momentum on their side, they can work things into their favor. This is really unpredictable because we've never quite seen a negotiation as weird as this in the Shanahan-Lynch era. It seems that Aiyuk has been all over the place with what exactly he's wanted. It seems that the 49ers have put their foot down and they want to, see something actually develop. And then you have other teams, you talk about the value of Brandon Aiyuk. I think that we shouldn't discount how damn good he's been. And this is the graphic that I like to use over the course of the offseason. As you can see here, this is on the x-axis, you have raw separation grade from Pro Football Focus. On the y-axis, it's the catch point grade and the yak grade. So if you have some drops and you're not good at yak, it's going to be a dot that's further down. So you want to be further to the right and further up. Look where Brandon Aiyuk is at. So when we talk about the New England Patriots wanting to potentially pay Brandon Aiyuk top 5 receiver money, I think that this graph illustrates why. They've got Drake May. They've got a young quarterback that they want to shepherd along in New England, and they believe in weaponizing the offense. That's what they've said over there. They want to weaponize the offense in New England, so they think, okay, if we can get a receiver. They wanted to sign Calvin Ridley. They ended up losing a bidding war to the Tennessee Titans for Calvin Ridley. So now they want to go after Brandon Aiyuk, and they see per play efficiency like this, and they're like, okay, this guy's really legit. I'm just telling you how the Patriots might be thinking based on the reports. Mike Reese, who covers the Patriots for ESPN, has essentially said that the Patriots are willing to pay Brandon Aiyuk north of $30 million per year. The top receiver in the NFL is right here on the chart. That's Justin Jefferson as far as money per year. What's he at? 34, 35 million per year. Amon-Ra St. Brown is right here. He's also in the upper right. He's actually right by Deebo Samuel. But you can't deny that Brandon Aiyuk is in an extremely impressive spot on this graph. And the 49ers love him as a player. But the 49ers have certain financial constraints, and I think that they've made it clear at this point that they're not going to be able to cross those constraints. And they know their books better than anyone. They know how the salary cap is going to work moving forward. Who knows? There might be a reduction in the salary cap if revenues in the league dip, and they know that they're going to have to set aside some space to pay Brock Purdy. So the 49ers have drawn what appears to be a hard line. The Patriots' line for Brandon Aiyuk, according to reports, is obviously higher. I'm guessing the Steelers would be higher, and so would Cleveland's number for Brandon Aiyuk. That just means that the receiver is going to have to decide what he prioritizes. Appreciate you, John. Thank you. Will I miss Brandon Aiyuk on the Niners if he gets traded? Well, I just cover the team. I just tell you what happens. I don't miss anybody or want them to sign a certain player. I'm just here to tell you the facts in an unbiased way and move forward. I think the 49ers will miss him, but it's a business. And if you do have to let go of a player, if you deem it necessary, that you will miss, there are ways to make up for some of his production, not even necessarily through the position group that he plays. So, I mean, the receiver position group is loaded with a lot of good talent for the 49ers. Are they worse without Brandon Aiyuk? Of course, they're worse. But there's relatively more slack. There's a relative dearth of talent at defensive end depth for San Francisco. So say that Matthew Judon came over from the Patriots. All of a sudden, you help a portion of your team that is deficient, that is defensive line depth, where Robert Beal is competing for a rotation spot. Maybe Robert Beal is going to be a good player, but he still hasn't proven himself. But you help an area that's deficient if you add a good veteran there, while you take away an area where there's a little bit more of a surplus. So you get a little worse on the offense. Everybody gets that. But you were already number one offensively last year, but you were number 10 defensively. So maybe that surge, and they've already retooled the defensive line. There's already 5-6 new bodies in there. That's been the biggest overhaul of Chris Kasarek's time with the 49ers. So maybe that added punch, one more piece from somebody like Matthew Judon, allows you to outweigh the loss of Brandon Aiyuk. That's how it would work on paper. And you're asking what would work on paper? Well, that's how the 49ers threading the needle, letting go of Brandon Aiyuk, yet still trying to get better in 2024 would work. That's how they would have to execute it. I'm not here to tell you that it would work for sure because I can't see the future, but I'm here to tell you what the strategy of the situation would be. This is a good question. The 49ers are a very physical team. Is Ricky Pearsall as physical as Brandon Aiyuk? I think he's a strong physical receiver, but Brandon Aiyuk is 200, 205 pounds. He's a big, strong, wiry guy. Ricky Pearsall weighs in at 192. So his frame is not quite as big as Brandon Aiyuk's. I actually asked Leonard Hankerson, the 49ers wide receiver coach, this very question yesterday. I didn't mention Brandon Aiyuk, but I just wanted to know how he feels that Ricky Pearsall stacks up strength-wise. And the 49ers have always thought that Pearsall plays stronger than his frame. I think it's because of a lot of that strength is in the lower body, so he's able to get good drive from his lower body. That's why he's been good beating press man coverage. And I think he's a really willing blocker. The first thing I said about Ricky Pearsall when I saw him take the field in team drills after the hamstring injury was that this guy's getting after it when the ball is not on his side of the field. So even if they run right and he's lined up left, he's executing his blocking assignment. And he wasn't manhandling people, although he did deck the assistant one day, one of the wide receiver assistants. He just ran over him. It was funny. I think I posted the video as a short. But he's not manhandling people 11 on 11. Maybe he'll grow into that. Maybe his form will improve over time. But I think he's definitely holding his own as a blocker. Make no mistake that Brandon Aiyuk is an exceptional player. It's not just because of the insane receiving efficiency that we see on charts like this. It's also because he can block his ass off. I mean, Brandon Aiyuk is special in terms of blocking. We're talking about the Steelers and Brandon Aiyuk. Do you guys remember the 65-yard touchdown run by Christian McCaffrey early in the second half of that game last year? Go watch the tape, and I've broken it down before. Brandon Aiyuk peels off to the left, and he helps. I forgot who he was helping, but he helps on a double team against Alex Highsmith, who is a good edge rusher. For a split second, he offers some chip help, administers the chip, and then Brandon Aiyuk takes off, bolts downfield, and takes out the safety, DeMonte Casey. And it took him about 4 seconds to get from one spot to the next 15 yards away. So he did 2 blocks in 4 seconds, and he pancaked Casey, the second guy. You get an edge rusher, which is really tough for a receiver, even if you're chipping, and then you get the safety on your own on a pancake. I mean, that's impressive stuff. I think those are huge shoes to fill if the 49ers have to fill them. Thank you, Jay. I appreciate you. I will keep up the unbiased reporting. That's the goal. I know that the last few days might have driven a lot of you crazy. There's a lot of rage bait out there, just stuff to get people mad and get people worked up. It's not what I'm about. I think that I'm about is giving you accurate news and accurate analysis to make you smarter fans. So I'll keep on doing my best there. Got a lot of people saying pay BA. I think that we have a poll out. Did Mike put a poll out? That may be where that's coming from. Do I think Brandon Aiyuk is going to be as good on another team? Team coach and culture. How's he going to be the number one wide receiver facing the top corners in the game. Well, I mean, Ayuk has already been facing the top corners in the game. Guy can get open. He's a good player. Okay. Now, does some of the coverage alleviate when you've got so many other good players in the team? Of course it does. Of course, everything's easier with the 49ers. So that's one of the benefits. Again, I mentioned this at the top of the show. If you're Brandon Ayuk, you've got to think about the potential benefits of staying with the 49ers as far as getting a potential third contract in the NFL. Because if you're not targeted quite as much, you're also not hit as much, right? So, and you have a chance to make it a longer career. It's not like he's devoid of statistics with the 49ers. He's still going easily over 1,000 yards per season. So what was it, 7 touchdowns last year? That wasn't the highest amount. I think the 49ers had a lot of mouths to feed in the red zone, but 17.9 yards per catch led the NFL. So it's going to be easier with the 49ers than anywhere else. That is absolutely for sure. As far as being an efficient, productive player, yeah, of course it's going to be easier on the 49ers. That being said, you could probably rack up more raw statistics if you're the only guy somewhere else, even if you do get more defensive focus. Can the 49ers get Troy Fotanu from Pittsburgh? I highly doubt that. Because here's the thing, when you go out and get a rookie, I think I could illustrate this by opening up the salary cap page for Troy. The draft for first round picks, which Troy Fotanu is, slots a very, very big signing bonus. So for Fotanu, I have it right here. Let's get the contract up on the screen. The prorated signing bonus is the number 20 overall selection was $7.8 million. And here's the contract. So 2025? Yeah, 2025. No, 2024 is where we're at. Sorry, I thought we were in the second year of that deal. He's a rookie, but the prorated signing bonus is right here. That money for the prorated signing bonus has been stretched out over 4 years. That's how the league rule works. If you were to get rid of Troy Fotanu, you'd be paying a very large dead cap hit. You've paid the vast majority of his contract already if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. So teams generally are not incentivized to trade first round picks for a number of reasons, including the finances. And teams also are not incentivized to trade offensive linemen for receivers. It's just a higher value position, that potential tackle position. I know Brad for the SF Niners, he was a brief visitor on our show a little bit earlier today on Instant Reaction. He loved Fotanu coming out of Washington. I am looking for more good questions. Let's get them going here. We got our goodies saying long term, the 49ers are going to have to pay anyway to keep an elite team. Price of a championship caliber team. Pay Brandon Aiyuk the difference as the market will only increase every year. Well, the cap, it might increase every year, but if the economy falls on harder times, if NFL revenue as a result falls on harder times, then the cap may not actually increase as much every year. The 49ers have been riding these cap increases year after year. The only time that the cap decreased was in 2021 because the economy constricted. And if it's directly tied to NFL league revenue, which it is by rule, and that puts you in a little bit of a tough spot. The 49ers were able to climb themselves out of that hole. They weren't yet in a dire salary cap situation when 2021 came around, but they've got a lot more expenditures on the books since then. They obviously also have the expenditure for Brock Purdy looming past that. Here's a question about a 3-team trade. Is a 3-team trade possible? Aiyuk to the Browns, Cooper and a first and second to the 49ers, and then flip Cooper to the Raiders for Devontae Adams. Every single day that I cover this, especially this particular situation, it seems like it's more and more like the NBA. That's something that I think would happen in the NBA. I've never heard of it happening in the NFL. I think the contracts are a little harder to mix and match in the NFL. I think that might be one of the primary reasons. But yeah, I'm not so sure that would be possible. Now, maybe there's a first time for everything, so we'll keep our eyes peeled. John says, I don't completely understand trade and contract rules. Can the 49ers organization just straight up say no to trades and BA is unhappy and choose to sit out the entire season? Yeah, but I mean, both of those things can happen. The 49ers can say no, we're not going to honor your trade request. And they can tell him you can play and we're not going to, they could also rescind their contract offer. But if he doesn't, he also doesn't have to take their contract offer. So they could say no trades and Brandon Aiyuk can say no to the contract, the new one, and that would mean that he's under contract for this season only at 14.1 million. If Brandon Aiyuk sits out the season, he's not going to make that 14.1 million. Every game that he sits out, he would lose what is it, 784,000, the amount of money the 49ers can fine him this weekend for the missed preseason game. So at a certain point, you would think that it becomes financially prohibitive for Brandon Aiyuk to take that path. That's why the 49ers have a lot of leverage in this situation on their side. But the 49ers also want to make sure they do what's best for their team. There's so many different considerations. And having a guy that's refusing to play, sitting there as dead weight, if that's what this comes to, isn't exactly the best allocation of resources for the 49ers, which can encourage them to move on in different ways. Are Brock's throws better than last year? How so? I think he's throwing a little bit harder, maybe a little tighter spin on the football. He's more muscular this year. He's tried to add throwing velocity to what he's doing. We're going to need to see him in a game situation to verify everything, to be able to compare the tape to last year's tape. But based on what I've seen in practice so far, those are my observations. George Pickens for Brandon Aiyuk. I think that's something that would make the 49ers much more comfortable with letting go of Brandon Aiyuk. You get a weapon in return. Is he as good as Aiyuk? No, but again, there are trade-offs in life, and maybe you get a pick on top of that. And if you get a pick on top of that, if you could raise that price up enough from the Steelers, you also will save $14 million by trading Brandon Aiyuk. His current contract is still counting against the cap at 14 million. Even if you don't give him a new deal, if you do trade him away, you save that money, which could be significant toward acquiring another player at the trade deadline this year. All these things are possibilities that we have to consider in the very complex situation at hand. So those of you just joining, these are the dog days of 49ers training camp. Christian McCaffrey has a calf strain. Elijah Mitchell has a hamstring strain. Ricky Pearsall might have a little bit of a shoulder issue. And off the field, the Steelers are back in the Brandon Aiyuk bidding war. They had fallen out yesterday because their offers were not on par with the Browns and with the Patriots. But it appears that the 49ers have organized at least some sort of competition for the services of Brandon Aiyuk if they do indeed decide to trade him. That being said, the Patriots are willing to pay Brandon Aiyuk big money. So that's according to Mike Reese, who covers the Patriots. He's talking about something like top 3, top 5 money. Could be 31, 32 million a year. We know that the 49ers are about 26, 27 million a year. We know that it's been hard to get any movement since late April after Amon-Ra St. Brown signed. And then obviously Justin Jefferson signed after that. It created real negotiation polarization. So if another team is willing to pay Brandon Aiyuk more because they got more money, because that's usually what happens with bad teams, maybe Aiyuk will follow the money. Maybe he won't. That's why a 49ers re-signing is not out of the question until he is actually gone. I think everything is on the table. The 49ers could actually be putting in Brandon Aiyuk into a box intentionally here, there, with the ability to find him coming this week. They could be laying out some trade offers that they know he doesn't want to accept. They know that he doesn't want to go to New England. Maybe the money will convince him otherwise. They know that he hasn't wanted to go to Cleveland. Maybe money there can convince him otherwise, but the 49ers can definitely create a situation in which they can at least force some uh, the bottom line in this saga. Forcing action is important for the 49ers because last year they had to wait a really long time for Nick Bosa, and that ended up hurting the football team. We got some news for you. I'm going to put this up on the screen. This is something that everybody should pay attention to. Even if you're not going to be in the Nashville area this weekend, because we are going to be trying to do more of these at a later time this year, maybe in different cities, maybe in the Bay Area. As you know, the 49ers will be all around the country. Therefore, so will I. But the first ever Lombardi Lounge meetup is coming this week, a day ahead of the 49ers preseason game against the Titans. Come hang out with me, Margot, and some of our friends. No sign up necessary, just show up. So it's going to be on Friday. That's good. Geez, 3 days from now. It's already August 6th. So this is on Friday, August 9th. Maybe we'll get Greg Papa to show up too. Maybe we'll get some 49ers players to show up. I don't know about that. I think they got to be at the hotel the day before their preseason game. I don't know if they're going to be in time, but I'll check with Greg to see when the plane comes. It's going to be at Barline's Bar in the Omni Hotel, not far from Broadway, if you're in Nashville ahead of the 49ers' first preseason game. And if you want a Lombardi Lounge meetup this year in a city that the 49ers traveled to, let me know where you're from in the comment section and tell me in that comment that you want to meet up in that city. And we're going to gauge interest in each city. I know there's 49ers fans all over the place. And as we gauge that interest, maybe we'll put some stuff on the books. A lot of this is up to Margot to organize. I have her in charge of that. So she's organizing this first one. It's just going to be casual. You can come get a drink and we'll move on with our lives after that. Maybe we'll all go out on Friday in Nashville. Could be good. It's going to be good to be over there back in town. I spend a lot of the off seasons there. And Margot's going to be out in San Francisco a lot of this season. So that should be fun as well. All right. That's your 49ers update. Let me know about 49ers meetups. If you're watching this later on, toss it in the comment section. We will talk to you very soon.